Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a sledgehammer to one of the most trusted pillars of higher education.
It's a big one.
Yeah. You know, when you're looking at a university, maybe for yourself, maybe for your kid, and you scroll down, way down to the footer of the website, you see that little stamp, accredited.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like a safety net, right? It feels like the academic equivalent of the USDA stamp on a steak or, I don't know, a 5-star crash safety rating on a car.
It's the good housekeeping seal of approval. It implies that, a serious group of experts has popped the hood, checked the engine, and certified that this institution is high quality.
Exactly. That is the assumption we all operate on.
Right.
But the source we are covering today, an incredibly provocative text titled Accreditation Agencies Are Cartels, argues that this trust is completely misplaced.
And it's a strong claim.
It is. The author isn't just complaining about administrative bloat or red tape. They are making a structural economic argument that accreditation isn't designed to ensure quality at all. They argue it's a mechanism designed to create artificial scarcity.
Essentially a cartel.
Exactly, a cartel.
And, it's a heavy accusation. And to be clear right off the bat, the source isn't saying the people working in these agencies are villains twirling their mustaches in a dark room.
No, not at all.
It's arguing that the incentives of the system are set up to protect the incumbents, the Harvards, the Yales, the big established state schools, and to keep real competition out. It's about market dynamics, not morality.
So the mission for this deep dive is to unpack that claim. We need to figure out why higher education is, the only major high-stakes industry that refuses to use objective, measurable standards.
And how it gets away with it.
Right. We're going to look at the legal architecture, specifically the Higher Education Act, that allows this to happen. And we're going to discuss this really fascinating concept the author presents. The difference between gaming a system and optimizing for excellence.
That distinction is just crucial. Because the standard defense you always hear from regulators is that they can't use strict numbers because schools will just cheat.
Right.
And this source just flips that entirely on its head.
Let's start right there then. The fear of metrics. If you've worked in corporate or government or really anywhere with a boss, you've heard this. It's often called Goodhart's Law, isn't it?
Yeah. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
Right.
So the argument goes something like this. If you tell a university, you must have 50,000 books in your library to be accredited, a bad actor, what we call a diploma mill.
A scam school.
Right, a scam school.
Yeah.
They'll just go buy 50,000 used romance novels from a recycling center, dump them in a room, and say, we passed. They've hit the number, but they haven't provided any real value.
Or if you say you need a 90% graduation rate, they'll just stop failing students. They'll pass everyone, regardless of whether they actually learned anything.
And so the regulators look at that and they say, see, objective metrics are dangerous. They encourage shortcuts. We need humans to evaluate the vibe of the place instead.
And on the surface, that sounds reasonable.
It does. We don't want diploma mills. But the source argues this is a huge logical fallacy. They actually call it the bad metric fallacy.
The bad metric fallacy.
Yeah, the problem isn't that you used a metric, it's that you used a stupid metric.
Meaning, counting books is a proxy for access to knowledge, but it's a really bad proxy.
A terrible one. The source argues that gaming is only a problem when your metrics are superficial. But if you design what they call a well-engineered metric, then gaming the system actually becomes indistinguishable from doing a good job.
Okay, I want to drill down on this because it's a little bit abstract.
Yep.
The source uses a pilot analogy that I thought was just brilliant. It completely changed how I see this whole thing.
Oh yeah, think about aviation. The metric for a commercial pilot is, essentially, land the plane safely on the runway at the correct airport. That is a hard objective outcome.
You either do it or you don't.
Right. Now, if a pilot decides to game that metric, if their entire selfish goal is just to hit that number so they can keep their job, what do?
And land the plane safely.
They study the approach, they check the wind, they manage the throttle. They are gaming the metric by achieving the exact outcome we want. In a well-engineered system, the cheat code is competence.
So let's apply that to a university. If the metric is book count, I can cheat. But what if the metric is, say, graduates must pass a third-party blind-graded exit exam in their field?
Or graduates must be employed at a certain salary threshold within a year. How to game that?
Well, the only way to game it is to actually teach the students well enough to pass the test or get the job.
You have to optimize your curriculum, Hire better teachers, support the students. You're forced to become a better university just to hit the number.
So is the source saying that regulators are just lazy? That they hide behind this fear of gaming because they don't want to do the hard work of designing ungameable metrics?
Lazy might be a part of it, but the source suggests it's more about institutional self-preservation, which we'll definitely get to.
Okay.
But yes, the criteria for a good metric are laid out very clearly in the text. It has to be comprehensive, aligned with real outcomes, and empirically validated. The fact that higher ed regulators just throw their hands up and say it's impossible to measure education makes them a total outlier.
That leads us right to the comparison section of the source, which really drives this home because we trust objective standards with our lives every single day. You mentioned aviation.
Right? The FAA doesn't have a vibes-based approach to whether a plane is airworthy.
No.
They don't send a group of other pilots to walk around a plane, kick the tires, and say, yeah, it feels like a good plane to me.
Same.
They have specific numeric tolerances. The metal must be this thick. The pressure has to be this high.
Engineering is another one they mention. Bridges don't fall down because we have math-based standards.
And ABET accreditation for engineering is very rigorous, very metric heavy.
Yeah.
Or look at medicine. The FDA doesn't approve a drug because a panel of doctors thinks it seems like a nice pill.
Right, you need data.
You need clinical endpoints. Data.
Yeah.
Statistical significance.
Yeah.
The source points out that in all these other fields, finance, medicine, engineering, aviation objective standards are the primary tool used to prevent fraud.
Yet in higher education, the argument is that objective standards invite fraud. It's a complete inversion of logic. It's almost gaslighting.
It really makes higher education the huge outlier. Because the source basically asks, why is this one industry so special? Why is education quality considered this mystical, ineffable thing that you can't measure when heart surgery safety or investment banking compliance can be?
And the answer the source gives is, it's not special.
It's protected.
It's protected. And this brings us to the whole cartel argument. Why would they fight so hard to keep the standards subjective?
To control the market. I mean, imagine you are an established elite university. You have a massive endowment, a 200-year history, a powerful brand. Do you want a system where a new, scrappy startup university can come along and prove, with hard data, that they teach students just as well as you do for half the price?
Absolutely not. That commoditizes my product. My whole thing is the mystique.
Exactly. If the standards are objective, you need $10 million in the bank, 50 PhDs, and a 90% pass rate on this specific exam, then anyone who hits those numbers must be let into the club. It breaks the monopoly.
But if the standards are qualitative...
Qualitative. That's the magic word the source just keeps coming back to.
It seems like it.
It is. If the standard is sufficient number of qualified faculty or adequate resources or appropriate academic culture, well, who gets to decide what sufficient or appropriate means?
The people who are already in the club, the accreditors, are made up of staff from existing universities.
Bingo! It's peer review, which sounds nice and collegial, but in market terms, it means your competitors get to decide if you're allowed to compete with them. It allows for gatekeeping.
Total gatekeeping.
You can look at a new innovative model, maybe an online-first school or a project-based school, and say, well, you have the money and the teachers, but we just don't feel like you have the right academic atmosphere.
And you can't really argue with atmosphere.
No, you can't sue atmosphere. And that vagueness creates a massive legal shield.
Yeah.
The source really dives into this, and I think it's the most technical, but also maybe the most important part of the argument.
Okay.
The legal architecture that protects this whole cartel, this is where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, let's unpack this. The source cites the Higher Education Act and specifically something called 34 CFR Part 602. Sounds really dry, but the implications are huge. What does this law actually say?
It's basically the operating code of the system. And the source highlights the specific language used in the statute. It is deliberately, almost poetically ambiguous. It uses terms like sufficient, adequate, appropriate, and acceptable.
Acceptable student achievement. I mean, what is acceptable? Is it a C average? Is it graduating 50% of your class? Is it 10%?
The law doesn't say. And because the law doesn't say, the interpretation is left entirely to the accreditor. The statute uses a phrase the source calls a legal firewall. It designates the accrediting agency as a reliable authority.
Reliable authority. Okay, so in a court of law, that phrase must carry some serious weight.
Immense weight. It creates a doctrine of what the source calls judicial impotence. Let's just play this out. Let's say you start a new university. You have great teachers, great funding, your students love it, but the accreditor rejects you. They say your curriculum isn't robust enough.
Okay, so I sue them.
You take them to court. You say, Your Honor, look at my curriculum. Look at my test scores. It's fantastic.
Right.
And the judge will look at the law. And the law says the accreditor is the reliable authority on quality. The judge is not an expert on curriculum design.
Of course not.
The judge sees that Congress delegated the definition of quality to the accreditor. So the judge cannot substitute their judgment for the accreditors. They can't look at your evidence and say, actually, you know what, this university is good.
Wait, so the judge can't rule on whether I was treated fairly on the merits of my case?
They can only look at the process. The judge can only ask, did the accreditor follow their own procedure? Did they hold the meeting on time? Did they read the documents? Did they check the boxes? If the answer is yes, the judge must defer to the accreditor's decision. You cannot sue your way in on the merits.
That is just incredibly frustrating. It sounds like a completely closed loop.
It is.
And you contrast that with the objective standard we talked about. If the standard was, must have $5 million in liquid assets and I have $5 million.
Then the judge can look at a bank statement and rule in your favor. It's simple. Objective standards are justiciable. They can be proven or disproven in court. Subjective standards are not.
And the source argues that this vagueness is a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. It insulates the cartel from legal challenges.
So if I'm a new entrant trying to disrupt the market, I'm just blocked. I can't prove my quality with data because they won't even accept it, and I can't sue because the courts defer to them.
You're dead in the water. And this is why we see so little innovation in higher ed compared to, say, tech or even finance. The regulatory wall is just too high and way too slippery to climb.
So I have to ask, is this just a U.S. problem? We tend to think of the American university system as, particularly expensive and exclusive. Is it better in Europe or Asia?
Are they using objective metrics over there?
Yeah.
You would hope so. But the source says no. This is a global phenomenon. The acronyms change. In Europe, it's the ESG. In the UK, it's the QAA. In Australia, it's TQSA. In Singapore, it's EduTrust.
But the mechanism is identical.
Identical. They all use the peer review, vibes-based model. The source notes that there is almost no jurisdiction in the world where university accreditation is deterministic, where you can just punch in the numbers and get a clear yes or no. It is always discretionary.
Why? Why has the entire world converged on this clearly inefficient system? Is it just that everyone copied the U.S. model?
Partly, but it's also because the incentives for the incumbents are the same everywhere. The source calls this the cynical truth. We look at the system and we say, it's broken, it's slow, it's expensive.
Yeah, that it's failing.
But the source argues it isn't breaking at all. It is functioning exactly as intended.
Which is to ration legitimacy.
That's the phrase that really stuck with me, rationing legitimacy. The value of degree from Oxford or Harvard or the University of Melbourne relies, in part, on the fact that not everyone can get one. If 500 new universities opened up tomorrow that were just as good and certified as such, the value of the old guard degrees would plummet.
It's protecting the asset value of the elites. It's just simple supply and demand.
Correct. It's creating artificial scarcity. If you think of education as a product, the cartel is designed to limit the supply to keep the price and the prestige high.
This really reframes that diploma mill argument we started with. We usually think of regulators as the good guys trying to stop the scammers.
But the source argues that the diploma mill is just a convenient boogeyman.
A boogeyman.
Yeah. Regulators hold up this scary image of a fake online school and say, we need all this discretionary power to stop them. But in reality, who are they actually stopping?
They're stopping the innovators, the people who might actually offer a better, cheaper education.
Exactly. A real diploma mill would fail a strict exit exam anyway. You don't need a committee of peers to spot an obvious scam. A simple test would do it just fine. The fact that they refuse to use the test suggests they aren't afraid of the scams. They're afraid of the legitimate competition that would pass the test.
That is the aha moment for me. The refusal to measure anything suggests a fear of what the measurements would actually reveal.
It suggests they want to reserve the right to say no to someone who is actually doing a good job. And that is the ultimate power.
I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, this idea of your reasoning versus the system's reasoning. The source draws this sharp contrast, and I think it helps explain why we all get so frustrated when we look at this stuff.
Yes, this is a great mental model for you to use. When you or I look at this, we use what the source calls mechanistic reasoning, we think. We want quality education.
Okay.
Therefore, let's define quality. Let's measure it. Let's reward those who achieve it.
That's just logical. It's how we solve engineering problems. It's how you fix a leak in your roof.
But the system uses political reasoning. It asks a totally different set of questions. It asks, who holds power right now? How do we maintain that power? How do we prevent disruption?
So they create rules that sound like they are about quality, appropriate academic standards, but are actually just about control.
Right. So when we get frustrated that the system isn't fixing itself, it's because we're trying to debug code, but they're playing a Game of Thrones.
That's a great way to put it.
You cannot fix a system with logic when the system is fundamentally built on politics. The vagueness isn't a mistake. It's the weapon.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Maybe you're looking for a college, or maybe you're just interested in how the world works. How should this change your perspective?
Well, I think the practical takeaway is to be very skeptical of prestige and accreditation as simple proxies for absolute quality. Understand that a highly ranked university is definitely part of an exclusive club, but that club is exclusive partly because they've rigged the door, not just because they have the best dance floor inside.
It makes you wonder how many great schools never even got built because they couldn't get past the bouncer.
And also, to recognize that gaming the system isn't always bad. That was the big pivot for me from the source. If the metrics are good, we want people to game them. We want universities waking up every morning terrified that their graduates won't get jobs, so they work incredibly hard to ensure they do. We should be harnessing that selfish instinct, not trying to suppress it.
It's a sobering look at how the sausage is made in the ivory tower. We like to think of academia as this, pure pursuit of truth, distinct from the dirty world of commerce.
But under the hood, it's running on some pretty ruthless cartel mechanics. And until we are willing to embrace objective standards, until we are willing to risk a little bit of gaming in exchange for real transparency, that won't change.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that really struck me while reading this. We spend so much time in society afraid of bad actors. We build these massive bureaucracies just to stop the theoretical diploma mill. But in doing so, we block the theoretical genius who could reinvent education for half the cost.
Cost of safety is stagnation.
Exactly. So ask yourself, what are we really afraid of? Are we afraid of bad schools? Or are we as a society, the elites, the system, simply afraid of losing the power to decide who matters? It's a question of control versus truth. And right now, control is winning. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
See you next time.